Continuing with our AFC preview, let's go on now to the AFC West division. And my pick to win the AFC West will be the defending two-time AFC champion Kansas City Chiefs. They will be my pick to win the AFC West with a record of 13-4. Their over-under in Vegas is 12.5, and their odds to win the Super Bowl right now plus 450. I will get you their odds for the Chiefs to win the division in just 1 second as I get it up here. Kansas City right now to win the AFC West is minus 350. So if you want to risk $10, you would have to risk $35. I think when we watch the Kansas City Chiefs over the last couple of years, really since Patrick Mahomes has been named their starting quarterback, we have seen a result of what happens when you combine one of the best head coaches in the league and a great offensive mind in Andy Reid with an elite talent at quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, and then elite skill position players like Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. What should scare the rest of the league about the Kansas City Chiefs is that last year, especially in the Super Bowl, their clear weakness was the offensive line. I've never seen a quarterback run for his life as much as I saw Patrick Mahomes just scrambling for his life in the Super Bowl. And Kansas City, their offensive line is much improved. They obviously bring in some big-time additions like Joe Thuney, a guard from the New England Patriots, as well as Orlando Brown, the former Baltimore Raven. And I think if you ask me, Zach, what was, in your opinion, the most impactful move made during this past NFL offseason? And my answer to that question would actually be the Chiefs bringing in Orlando Brown, because they stole him from the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens just decided they wanted to pay Ronnie Stanley. He obviously got hurt last year. It was super unfortunate how everything went down. Orlando Brown wanted to play left tackle, and the Ravens didn't want to make that happen, so they let go of Orlando Brown. He is now the Chiefs starting left tackle along with Joe Thuney at left guard from New England. They bring in a pair of rookies, Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, along with Lucas Niang, the second-year player who right now is projected to start at right tackle. And I think offensive line could be a big key for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think at this point, we know what their offense is going to do. They're going to put up a whole lot of points. Even their defense, it's not the best unit in the world, but being led with guys like Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, and Frank Clark and Chris Jones. They bring in Jaron Reed, Derek Nandi. Like, the Chiefs defense has guys that can make plays. I'm also a huge fan of L'Jarius Sneed, the young second-year corner from Louisiana Tech, one of the more underrated players in the NFL. He proved very early on in his career that he could be a top corner, and I only expect him to get better. I love what Steve Spagnuolo has done running this defense, and the Chiefs have gone to the Super Bowl the last 2 years. They know how to win. They will be my pick to win the AFC West. What Patrick Mahomes has done throughout the course of the start of his career has been unbelievable. There have been very few players I've ever seen that have accomplished nearly as much as he has, and he is only getting better. He's only getting towards his prime, closer to his prime, and I think that's when we watch Patrick Mahomes, we are just so amused. Kansas City will be my pick to win the AFC West. All Andy Reid has done over the last couple of years has been win divisions. I don't think he'll have any trouble here. I also expect Kansas City's run game to get much better. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be a guy that has a nice season. I think last year that was another component that Kansas City was missing a little bit. They were never really able, I think, to establish a clear, consistent running game. They obviously took Edwards-Helaire with a first-round pick in 2020. They're going to want to see a little more out of him. I think they could get it. Kansas City will be my pick to win the AFC West at 14-3. My pick to come in second place, I will have this team as a wild card, and I'll go over my full 7 playoff teams before this show ends. It's going to be the Los Angeles Chargers, and I think the Chargers are a team that over the last couple of years, they have not lacked talent. They have always had really good talent, being led by guys like Phillip Rivers at quarterback, and then Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Joey Bosa, Melvin Ingram, Derwin James. They've always had players that can make big-time plays. However, that talent never equated to wins, and we all tried to figure out why. But I think for the first time in a while last year, we saw that Anthony Lynn just wasn't made to be an NFL head coach. There were a number of games where the Chargers lost last year simply because Anthony Lynn just didn't know how to manage a clock. His clock management was embarrassing, and I do think the Chargers absolutely made the right decision letting him go. Enough was enough. You just had to take that guy out of his misery. Over the past 2-3 years, how many just close, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, devastating losses have this Los Angeles Chargers team had? And enough was enough. And I like the guy they bring in. They bring in former Los Angeles Rams defensive coordinator Brandon Staley. And if you look at Brandon Staley's resume, a lot of people would be confused. And they would ask themselves, how is this guy, after only spending a couple of years as the Chicago Bears linebackers coach and then only 1 year as the Los Angeles Rams defensive coordinator, how does this guy get an NFL head coaching job? And I just think it's because he's so smart. He made a clear impact with that Los Angeles Rams defense. They always had talent, but they were the best defense in the NFL last year, and there were many games they won, including that playoff game against Seattle where that Rams defense stepped up and made big-time plays and really was able to just put the team and the offense that was really struggling on its back. And another thing that this Chargers defense doesn't lack is talent. Brandon Staley is going to coach Joey Bosa and Derwin James and Asante Samuel Jr. and guys like that. And I think the Chargers, with that talent, with hopefully a guy who knows how to utilize it, should be one of the better teams in the AFC. We know about Justin Herbert, just how good he looked last year, and it is crazy that the Los Angeles Chargers throughout camp last year, and funny, like no one was at practice last year, so we didn't really know, due to the COVID protocols, how exactly a guy like Justin Herbert was progressing throughout camp. And then we see Tyrod Taylor play that week 1 game against the Cincinnati Bengals. I remember the Chargers really had no business winning that game. And it was clear after watching that, it's like, is Tyrod Taylor really an NFL starting quarterback that could win games anymore? And then we know what happened week 2 against Kansas City pregame. That poor doctor punctures his lung, and Justin Herbert steps in, and he only throws, 35 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and clearly wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. It, quite frankly, wasn't that close. I think we could only expect Justin Herbert to get better playing with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Jalen Guyton, KJ Hill, the youngster Josh Palmer. They bring in Jared Cook. I really like this Chargers team. I think they're a playoff team. There's too much talent. I obviously really like the Brandon Staley hire, and I think it's going to be a big-time season for the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert has done a lot in terms of bringing up and raising the popularity of the Los Angeles Chargers in their city. We all know that LA has the Dodgers and the Lakers and the Rams and USC and UCLA and really so many other fun stuff to do that doesn't involve sports. The Chargers, I really didn't love the decision to move to Los Angeles. Money aside, San Diego was their home. San Diego was where they had all their fans. And in Los Angeles, the first couple of years, it was an embarrassment. They were playing in a soccer stadium. You guys remember when the Pittsburgh Steelers, a couple of primetime games, just took over that stadium? I know Steeler fans are the best, and they like to travel a lot, but the Chargers needed a real stadium. Now they have that, playing at SoFi Stadium with some fans in the stands for the first time. I think there's going to be some serious buzz around this Los Angeles Charger team. I think Brandon Staley is the real deal. He is just a smart mind. I believe he's an Ivy League grad. And look, if Sean McVay just hires you to replace Wade Phillips, keep that in mind. Sean McVay said bye to Wade Phillips, a guy who as a head coach and as a defensive coordinator has won a bunch in this league. He was the defensive coordinator for that Bronco team that ended up winning the Super Bowl with DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller. Sean McVay said goodbye to that guy for Brandon Staley, and he got crushed for it. The crazy thing is, it worked because Brandon Staley had the Rams defense playing at an elite level last year. I think he's going to have the Chargers and that defense playing up to a high standard. I like the Chargers to finish second place in the AFC West with a record of 10-7. My third place team in the AFC West is the Denver Broncos, and I think it's a real shame here because I do believe if the Broncos had any quarterback play, I would be pretty high on this team. I actually picked this team to make the playoffs last year with Drew Lock under center. From what I watched last season, I was just like, enough's enough. I don't think Drew Lock could really be their starting quarterback of the future. But I do think there's some talent on this team. They bring in Javonte Williams, a young running back who could run the ball from Buffalo. They obviously will get Cortland Sutton back and healthy coming off the devastating torn ACL. Jerry Jeudy is a player that I think will be much improved this year. But the problem is this. Their quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater, is a guy who I consider to be an elite backup quarterback. If your starter gets hurt and you need this guy to go 4-1 in a 5-game stretch, we saw what he was able to do in New Orleans. But we also saw last year in Carolina, he was just so blah, and he just couldn't elevate and push the ball downfield, and the Panthers were in a lot of games last year. They were competitive, and I actually do think that could be a similar case with this Bronco team. But my problem is, if you need Teddy Bridgewater to make a play late, he is not going to be able to get the job done. On a big 3rd and 12, when you need your quarterback sitting back in the pocket with all the pressure to make that one big throw, can Teddy Bridgewater get the job done? I don't think he can. And to be honest, even though Vic Fangio is an elite defensive coordinator, he is one of the best and smartest defensive minds in all of football. He had Brandon Staley as his linebacker coach, another endorsement of Staley. If you're Vic Fangio's linebackers coach, you really know what you're doing. But I just think Vic Fangio falls under the category of a guy who is a really good defensive coordinator, but is just not suited to be a leader on both sides of the ball. And that's fine. He's just an elite defensive coordinator. I just don't know if I could trust him as a head coach to elevate his whole team, offense and defense, and have them win games. And I do think that the Broncos are a team, going back to their quarterback situation, it starts in the front office. If I'm Denver, I like Patrick Surtain. I think he's going to be a phenomenal player. I think he has the chance to be an elite corner and a really good player for a long time in this league. But if Justin Fields works out in Chicago, and if you haven't listened to me, in my opinion, over the last couple weeks, I think Justin Fields is a baller. I think he is a guy that is athletic. He is fast. He can make all the throws. And obviously, the Bears' offensive line is in shambles. I don't quite frankly understand why they're starting Andy Dalton over Justin Fields, but we're going to get to the NFC North later in this show. The Broncos could have had him. And instead, they took another player on defense. And the issue I had with that pick was that Denver, over the last couple of years, haven't been lacking talent on defense. I understand Von Miller was hurt last year, but even when he was healthy the year before, they had guys like Bradley Chubb and Justin Simmons, who I consider to be one of the more underrated players in all of the NFL. Shelby Harris, Mike Purcell. They didn't need another corner. They needed a quarterback, and they gave Teddy Bridgewater the job over Drew Lock. If they wanted to make the case why they passed for Fields was that they thought that Drew Lock could still realistically be the starter, then fine. But to me, that couldn't be the case because Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater were neck and neck. If I were in that situation, I would have given Drew Lock the job because he has a better opportunity to make the big play. He has a greater opportunity to make other players around him better. Teddy Bridgewater is just a game manager, and I'll give him credit. He doesn't screw up. He is not going to be a quarterback that particularly loses your team's games, but at the same time, I just think when you're out here competing with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and even Derek Carr, we're going to get to the Raiders in a bit, I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is necessarily the right quarterback to win you games. So for that reason, I am not high on the Denver Broncos. I could see Vic Fangio not having a job by season's end. I will predict the Broncos to finish third in the AFC West with a record of 7-10. Finally, the team that I will have in fourth in the AFC West is John Gruden and the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'll start off by saying this. I actually think John Gruden is lucky that he had and signed a 10-year contract extension to become the head coach of the Raiders, because I actually think if his contract was shorter, then there was a really good chance that he would be on the hot seat right now, and he would be entering this season in a must-win situation. Obviously, the Raiders are not going to be firing him with all the money that he is owed over the next 4 or 5 years, so it's an important season for the Raiders. And I'll start off by saying this. I think that the Raiders' situation last year, moving during a COVID season, playing in a brand new stadium and a brand new city, the first season, and you don't have fans, that is just very odd. And for the first 11, 12 weeks of last season, I thought the Raiders were playing some really good football. They had one of the more impressive wins in the NFL last year, going into Arrowhead Stadium and beating the Kansas City Chiefs, coming back from a couple touchdown deficits early in that game. We remember what happened later in the season. The Chiefs come into Vegas, classic Sunday night game, a late win for the Kansas City Chiefs. And really, after that game, the Raiders just thought, okay, even our losses are close and are good enough. And when you have that attitude, it's just not going to be enough to get you in the playoffs, especially last year when you saw the shape of the AFC. There were just so many good teams competing for the wild card, whether it was Miami or Cleveland or Tennessee, like Indianapolis. There were so many teams competing for that wild card last year, and ultimately Las Vegas, they got left behind. Now, when you look at the Raiders, I do think another reason why I'm not particularly high on them is their drafting. There have been many times over the past couple drafts where it's the Raiders' turn to pick, and with the 4th overall pick, they will take the kid from Clemson, Cleveland Ferrell, or this year they will take the kid from Alabama, Leatherwood, playing right tackle, or the other kid they took, the corner from Ohio State, Damon Arnett, who apparently has not been playing very well at camp at all. What do all 3 of those picks have in common? The reason I bring those guys up is that at the time, I didn't necessarily call them bad picks because the players were bad. I just thought the Raiders reached on them. If you go by everyone else's draft rankings, the Raiders were taking guys like 20 picks too early. And I'm not criticizing them for wanting to draft those players. That's fine if you really think some player is better than another and the draft rankings don't agree with it. I'm not going to hate on you for taking that player, but trade back, gain some value. The Raiders easily could have gotten a bunch of those guys later in the draft, but didn't even bother. And I think the shame for the Raiders is that they have talent. I think Derek Carr is a quarterback that is completely capable of winning football games. I think he's a winning quarterback. The problem is his situation over the past couple of years hasn't been ideal. This defense has quite frankly stunk, and you hope with Gus Bradley running things this year instead of Paul Gunther, things will improve. But to be honest with you guys, I don't think it is. I have the Raiders finishing 4th in the AFC West with a record of 6-11. And once again, it's a shame because there's some talent on this team. I really like Brian Edwards, the young receiver they have, Henry Ruggs from Alabama. Their offensive line is still decent. They do lose Gabe Jackson and Rodney Hudson, 2 centerpieces. Hopefully it doesn't decline too much. Honestly, the more I look at it, I think the offensive line might as well just be a big-time concern. I'm not too high on Josh Jacobs this year, and the OL has a lot to do with it. Darren Waller is obviously a baller. Him and Carr will put up their fair share of points, but I'm out on the Raiders. I don't think their defense is going to be improved enough with the addition of Yannick Ngakoue, and yeah, I'm not too high on the Raiders. I'm not too high on their defense, and I just think the game has passed John Gruden by. You see a couple of executives in the Raiders front office getting fired over the last couple weeks. How crazy is that? You could just clearly tell that everyone in Vegas is not necessarily on the same page right now. Mark Davis still has a lot of pressure dealing with the casinos and the finances of that brand new stadium they just bought. So I'm concerned for the Raiders. I have them finishing 4th in the AFC West with the record of 6-11. They've really just blown some big-time opportunities over the last 2 years to get a playoff spot in one of Gruden's first couple of years in Vegas. It's funny. Gruden came in, he traded Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper, and everyone was panicking. It's like, what is this guy doing? Is he good? Does he really know what's going on? And then he wins some games early in the past 2 regular seasons to make fans believe, and then they just fall apart. They collapse the last 2 years, and if I was a Raider fan, I would really be frustrated. You guys remember that game against the Dolphins when Fitzpatrick came in and beat them last year? Rough. Raiders 4th place. To recap my AFC West picks, I will take Kansas City dominating and winning the AFC West with a record of 14-3. I'll take the Chargers in second, record of 10-7. Broncos in third with a record of 7-10, and the Raiders in fourth, 6-11.